off the ball.
With Bank of Ireland, a proud sponsor of Irish rugby. Never stop competing.
All right, you're very welcome to this emergency broadcast, which is reflective of the fact that Peter O'Mahony, Cian Healy and Conor Murray have all collectively announced their decision to retire from the Ireland team. Peter O'Mahony and Cian Healy have retired from all rugby, and Conor Murray will be taking up a new adventure abroad, is what it says. Pursue a playing opportunity abroad following the conclusion of his Munster contract in July. So speculation at the moment that it's France. By the time you see this or hear this, you may well know exactly where he's going, because if you've signed Conor Murray, you're probably announcing that. Host of Rugby Daily, Richie McCormack, how are you?
Ger, how are you?
Off the ball managing editor, Adrian Barry, how are you?
Ger, Richie, how are you doing?
Three of the best Ireland careers that anybody's put together in any era, all to be going at the same time. Not entirely unexpected, I suppose.
It's not unexpected, but it's a massive loss, just in the sense of how these three presences have been around that dressing room and the standard that they've all set, because it's now generations of Ireland head coaches have talked about the standards that are set from within. And those three, particularly actually when I think about Healy recently and how he's spoken about almost having a coaching eye and how he's looked after the other props in his dotage as a player, they're going to be huge losses from that dressing room. I don't doubt that there are others to step up into the equation, but in that immediate year after they're gone, like in November, when we're kind of recalibrating to full test status after whatever form the summer tour takes, they'll be missed for sure. Yeah,
I should say the other breaking news from this morning is that Felix Jones has rejoined South Africa as part of their coaching ticket. It comes 12 hours after the Munster head coach appointment. No one's joining dots from that, but it is
very fast work. If
it is a fact that these things have happened simultaneously. So a lot of the dominoes in World Rugby are falling. And look, the reason I bring it up is that Rassie Erasmus said this is all about 2027 and us retaining our World Cup in Australia, and these decisions for these three to go now, because you think that all of them could actually have some role to play within Irish rugby, continuing on the basis of the performances that they've had, right? So there will be big opportunities for someone to step into these roles for Ireland next season.
Yeah, the Cian Healy one is one that you expected, right? Like probably expected it some years ago. There was 2015 possibly. You remember he got a neck injury at that time, and I do remember very specifically he had an issue with the nerves in his hand afterwards, and there was a lot of speculation. In fact, I'm pretty sure there was papers put in front of him at that time, retirement papers and the insurance knock-on and all that sort of stuff, which seemed to be a very viable option for him at that time. But and I do remember him playing at times, having come back and speaking about the struggling to get a grip in his hand enough to be able to play around the loose. But obviously over time that came right. But when you think he knocked another 10 years out of his career after that, it's an incredible one. It's definitely one that people were probably expecting. I think there was a sense that potentially Murray and O'Mahony, that this was probably the last hurrah from an Ireland point of view in the Six Nations, but that potentially, they could go another year, either of those with Munster. And obviously O'Mahony has decided to call time, and Murray will, at the ripe old age of, he'll be 36 in April.
Oh, Murray's 36, is he?
He will be in April.
Yeah. He's in great shape. He's been as good recently as he ever has been.
Yeah, and there's no fault in him not getting into that Ireland team as well, is the thing. And he's under pressure in Munster, obviously Craig Casey coming through there. But, there was a time with himself and James Gibson Park where
1A and 1B.
And they were going for it, in terms of who would start. And James Gibson Park became the second best rugby player in the world, and that took that out of the equation. But the three of them have seamlessly filled this position of sort of grandfathers of the squad, and coming on with no sense of, I don't think Andy Farrell does sentiment particularly. No sense of just been included for what has gone before, and definitely added something and kept things ticking over from an Irish point of view.
I did wonder if there was a Dwayne Vermeulen finale to Peter O'Mahony's career, where you bring him to the World Cup and he comes on in big games because of the presence that he has, and just that kind of whole sense of leadership that I don't know. There's something intangible about Ireland with O'Mahony in the matchday setup, and so look, obviously someone's going to have to step up for that, but it's not happening.
Don't be surprised if he does kind of find his way. How quickly has the Sexton thing turned around, whereby he was gone and we're kind of lamenting the fact that this totemic figure of out half play has suddenly been stripped away from from both Ireland and Leinster, and then within the blink of an eye, he's back mentoring the out halves as they are. Don't be surprised to see Peter O'Mahony pop up in a coaching position, either with Munster or with Ireland, fairly quickly, because to take away that knowledge base and to take away that influence is one thing.
Speculating with Quinny earlier on about there's a gap in the forwards coaching ticket for Munster, because they have Codling at the moment on secondment from the women's team.
Yep.
And apparently he's gone back in the summer now. Obviously the new head coach would need to come in and go, yeah, I like the cut of your jib, but it wouldn't be. You'd be making a phone call anyway and saying, are you interested in this?
Well, I think from a cultural point of view, he's an obvious fit. Like, whether he's any good as a coach or not, who the hell knows, and we'll figure out down the track. But certainly from a cultural point of view, and that's obviously everything we've heard about the new Munster coach, that he's big on that side of it. Like, I think it was very interesting listening to Mike Sherry on Peter O'Mahony yesterday, and maybe in some regards, and it must have been a hard conversation for Mike Sherry to have, but in some regards, the numbers that he doesn't often bring to the team, like Peter O'Mahony, I'm certainly not saying he's in the team because of this, but it is a factor, obviously. The dog that he brings to it, the bit of shithousery that Peter O'Mahony can bring to a game. Do you remember on the Scotland match and all the conversation? For whatever reason, it seems to be the Scots particularly despise him.
Don't like playing against him.
And don't like him.
No.
I think by all accounts. Maybe it's as a result of that. But like, that is a big factor in what Peter O'Mahony brings to the party. How that translates as a coach would be interesting to see if he's any interest in it. The garden obviously needs a bit of tending. I remember himself and Quinny were down with him. Do you remember that a few years ago?
Yeah. Down
at his beautiful house down just outside Cork. And we get into a conversation about, match day and match week. And it was very, I think he probably got better subsequently. I certainly heard him talking about it after that. But, very affected by the nervousness of a week and, been physically sick and been totally consumed by the concept of getting out on the pitch, all of which disappeared, I think, once he actually got out there. But it was remarkable for somebody, even at that point in his career, like would have been.
Still see it during the anthems
30s.
There recently during the Six Nations.
He's the
one still getting emotional, and perhaps there's an element of he knows that this is the second, third, fourth last, whatever it might have been before he actually retires, and he knows that because obviously the IRFU have been kind of preparing for this in the last at least 48 hours.
It was something that was said about Ireland, not more recently, but a few years ago, that they didn't have enough of Peter O'Mahony's, that they didn't have enough dogs on the pitch or whatever. Maybe there's a few of those that have come to the fold since, and maybe they're just, the personality of the team is a different thing, that you require less.
I don't know. Let's wait and see in the next World Cup quarter-final and semi-final if we make it there. So O'Mahony's career highlights, like he ended up captaining the Lions. Obviously he's captained Ireland at various stages. Was part of a Munster team that won a trophy, because it did look for a long time like Munster were not going to take advantage of the fact that they had Peter O'Mahony in European competition and actually win a trophy while he was there. But what are the standout moments from O'Mahony for you guys?
Captain of the Lions has got to be. I think the Ireland captaincy probably, it felt like even at the time that it was a kind of a placeholder thing, and that perhaps his retirement was coming, and we were maybe waiting for somebody else to come in and step into the breach. But I think to be handed that mantle of captaining that Lions team, being able to lead them, even if it wasn't necessarily in the best of circumstances, is a huge thing. And I just like it's the repeated confidence that that having Peter O'Mahony on a pitch is going to deliver, like what Adrian mentioned, that sense of fight, that sense of urgency, that maintaining of standards across the pitch. He's not necessarily one person that you can say there's that one game or there's that one game or there's that one game. He's somebody who has operated such a consistent level for so long in that back row, wherever you happen to ask him to be deployed, and against the rotating cast of characters as well. He's outstripped them all, and I think that's probably going to be testament to him, almost like Healy, is that he was able to play it that long at that level. And if you still feel like, I think Munster are going to be missing something. They do have options, like there's people like Kendall and Coombs and Brian Gleeson and all that in the back row that they're coming along and have come along in the last few years that can step into the breach for sure. But like, you are going to miss him when he's not around. I mean, that's probably the thing that stands out the most for me, is that like there aren't too many Peter O'Mahonys around, and you don't go recreating them out of nowhere.
They're probably the last of the old, the hands across the divide to the really old brigade, or to the old brigade, right? Like, I mean, once these are gone, that connection is gone. And like, you look along the list of the stuff that Peter O'Mahony has won in his career, 2 URC championships or whatever they would have been at that time back in the day, 5 Six Nations, 6 hopefully, a couple of Grand Slams, 3 hopefully, 4 Triple Crowns, obviously the Lions, like it's some list. And when you consider the people that were handing the baton to him, like their honours lists would have been, certainly would have been,
as a Munster player,
would have been okay in the Munster side probably, with a couple of Heineken Cups and stuff, but not a whole pile beyond that. But I think his legacy is just like he'll be the last one I think that's spoken about really in relation to that sort of, like there is an old school nature to starting. I remember he was Ireland interim captain. Sexton must have been injured 3 or 4 seasons ago, and I remember having Ronan O'Gara on, and we were talking about the combustible nature of Peter O'Mahony, and I'd put it to him that the bonnet can come off with a bit of steam every now and then.
I've witnessed it firsthand, yeah. And
O'Gara was like, he wasn't leaning into that. Let's say he was very much saying that this is a guy who's been there and done it and is a true leader, but he had. He had literally the bonnet had come off against possibly Ellis Genge a couple of weeks previously in the thing, and so it was like, how can this mindset, I suppose, adapt to being a captain? But he certainly managed that. A different type of captain.
He's very protective of his teammates. Like, and as I say, I witnessed that firsthand over in Nantes a couple of years ago when there was the whole thing about what did or didn't Mac Hansen get up to on a beach and that,
remember that whole Andy Farrell's like, what's going on here? Obviously,
I had asked the question of Mac beforehand because they were rotating them through one after another in terms of press conferences, and I'd asked the question, not what did you do, or is it a worry that you'd be kind of associated with that kind of behaviour? Like, does that kind of stuff get to you? And O'Mahony jumped, came in and was like, afterwards, and was like, jumped down everybody's collective throat, but essentially it was aimed at me going, who's asking about that ball? Like, blah, 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 nothing going on. But there's this steeliness and this stare that you're like, oh shit, I've got the wrong side of the wrong person here. So you can imagine if you're on a pitch and you're coming up against that, because that'd be magnified tenfold. But yeah, he's not somebody that you'd want to cross, for sure.
There's a piece from Ultimate Rugby from last November detailing the 5 most capped players, Ireland versus New Zealand, and it's obviously Cian Healy's top of the list. He's now the most capped Irish player of all time, but Conor Murray's got 118 caps, and that's back in November as well. It's just and O'Mahony has 107, so there is a lot of knowledge that's leaving the squad. There's a lot of all that intangible stuff that people write self-help books about. It obviously matters at some level,
Oh yeah, that level of experience. Stuart Lancaster always talks about that. Having those caps in your squad, and listen, they're building along nicely. I don't think really that we're sitting here saying, "Oh, it's an awful shame for Ireland that these 3 players are retiring." I don't think there's that element to it. I think you've touched on some of it, Richie, but there's enough quality coming through or there that I don't think it's necessarily a huge dent in the prospects of Ireland for whatever, Six Nations, World Cups, whatever. But Conor Murray, I have just seen here, to remind myself, was on the World Team of the Decade for the 2010s.
Right.
Like,
pretty impressive. He arrived out of nowhere, fully formed, ready to go, and has been at the same level ever since. Like, one of the breakout players of that World Cup where you weren't even sure he was going to be starting, and then he was one of our best players. And from that point forward, he's been in the conversation, has basically been picked all the time. There has been just recently enough competition where you think actually maybe he's not going to be in the matchday squad, but then he always finds his way back in. And he'd had some minor injury problems along the way. Did you know he's actually older than Peter O'Mahony?
Oh, is he really?
Yeah. I did not know that.
Well, Peter O'Mahony's great. The few bits of grade, or that will always add on a couple of years.
Again, I'm going off the date of birth from Ultimate Rugby. It's a birthday in April 89. 20th of April 89 is Conor Gerard Murray, and then Peter James O'Mahony is September 89.
There you go. He was a different type of scrum half when he came on the scene. Like, everybody was getting used to having a scrum half that was 7'4" suddenly, from not that previously. And obviously, the Munster going back to the maybe a little bit of the old school after that. But that physicality that he brought, and when you think about Stringer, let's say, as a scrum half, and that sort of zippiness of pass, and that franticness around the pitch, Murray always seemed to glide around the pitch. you know,
there's
like
an effortlessness to his play.
an effortless to it, and like definitely a physicality that he would have brought.
He's a far bigger character in person than you'd actually ever make out, because obviously the majority of a scrum half's life is spent crouched and looking for the balls. It's not as if they're playing heads up rugby most of the time. But I've counted him in person on press conference duty. He passed up by me on Grafton Street a few years ago, and I'm no short man, as might be noted in here, and he was close enough to me in terms of height. So you can imagine what he can bring, and obviously he's fairly stacked as well. He's got a bit about him, and that ability to be able to handle yourself in that position as well has probably elongated his career to the point where, even though he is, as you say, older than Peter O'Mahony, he's going off to perhaps ply his trade in France for a year or two. And he's like, nobody could doubt, looking at his performances, that he does have a year or two left in him, if not more, with club rugby, provided he's minded and game management is looked after and all that kind of stuff, and he's in a squad where maybe he's rotating in and out with some other scrum half. He's got a couple of years left for sure, and will probably still play at a very, very, very high level with it.
Is he the only one who played in all the games we've ever beaten New Zealand? Is he the last? There was something about the New Zealand. His stats against New Zealand were better than everybody else's. I can't remember what the last time we beat them. Someone was like, "Oh yeah, there you go." Anytime Conor Murray's on, we managed to. Yeah. So an incredible career that he's put together, and certainly Soldier Field with my Conor Murray highlight. He was electric that day, chasing kicks and just being a nuisance while also scoring, and his ebullience, and several others players obviously on the day was at the very highest end, and so that was it from that perspective. And then Cian Healy smashing one of the All Blacks. Was it Richie McCaw? Did he smash Richie McCaw early on in that game? The one that ultimately we lose when they score in the 83rd minute after however long it was.
He's the one I'm interested to see what he does next, because he has spoken so openly about having a semi-coaching eye, like I mentioned earlier, from his last couple of years, and learning a lot from what the coaching staff were telling the younger players and adding his own tuppence worth into that as well. Like, he could be the one of the three. Like, people would have gone, "Oh yeah, Peter O'Mahony's like born leader. He's going to obviously go on and be a head coach somewhere else." Doesn't obviously play like that, doesn't track like that, and recent track records have kind of proved that out. But Healy's the one that I kind of think, yeah, maybe there is a head coach in there, or maybe there is a very good scrum coach in there. Leinster themselves might be looking for a scrum coach in the next while without wanting to, force Rob McBride off somewhere else. But there had been talk that maybe he could be joining a Simon Easterby ticket with Wales if that comes to pass. That remains to be seen. But I would say that Leinster will probably welcome that expertise of Cian Healy into their coaching staff straight away, because he's got all the tools to do it.
He was always a really quiet character. That would be the thing that I'd sort of feel that initially in his career, that would be the thing that, listen, maybe that has changed, but had always very clear interests. We don't have to follow his social media too closely to see that he's got clear interests, cooking and knives and
making knives,
and things.
do that part time
outside of the game.
Sell it on Etsy.
But yeah, I'm sure. Listen, him. It's never felt any of the three of them having felt, Peter O'Mahony obviously starting some of the games of the Six Nations, but if coming off the bench, even over the last few weeks, you never felt it was in any way diminishing the team. But at the same time, it does sort of it's like when somebody passes, you need to be thinking about, the vibrancy of them 10 years ago rather than, the more, an elderly person, let's say, a more sedate nature of the last few years. So there is that bit of you tend to forget in a lot of ways. These were world-class players in their prime.
Such a mobile loose head as well for his size, because again, he's no small fry, but the way he was able to get around the front row and the way he was able to hustle and harry at the breakdown still is. God, he's still got, these guys aren't going away for these last two rounds of the Six Nations. They're still there and can still do a job. So we still have to talk about them in the present tense, like Adrian mentions. And
yeah, I mean,
they're still really dynamic people to bring in off the bench and to try and affect games, not just be there to pat them on the head and counter caps.
It'll be interesting to see who gets picked for the remaining games, if the baton has been fully handed on at scrum time, and whether or not that was the passing of the guard. With regards to that, obviously there's no options but Murray to be on the bench from a scrum half perspective. Really, that is at this stage, you'd say he's still absolutely the second best scrum half we have. And then Peter O'Mahony played the full 80 minutes. Unexpectedly, I don't think anybody expected him to play that. If Conor hadn't gone off injured, you expect that O'Mahony would have come off at some point. But does that catapult him into, like, automatically in the matchday squad for the France game? Because, again, Mike Sherry was like, you know, there is a world in which actually they don't pick him, that they go with the extra second row at 6 because France are so big and beefy, and that in which case, if it's a 6-person bench, he's on the bench guaranteed. But if he's not starting 6, do you have room for him on the bench? In a 5-man bench, you probably don't.
It depends on how bullish you are as an interim head coach, I suppose is the question there, isn't it? Because, like, I was really interested in that conversation yesterday, and, like, or when it was the day before, the high wire nature of coaching at that level, because, like, it really tests your mettle, like, particularly the ones who've gone,
look at the A game,
Erasmuses.
Look at the A game on Sunday, whereby everything conspires against you when you've gone to 60 split the bench, and suddenly you have Max Deegan playing as a winger. Like, it can go very badly and very haywire very quickly. So there's probably enough to say, and enough quality in that squad to say that they do go to 5-3 split against France.
A 5-3 coach or a 6-2 coach, Richie?
I'd always go 5-3 because you're preserving those options for yourself later in the game. I don't know if there's any real necessity to go 6-2 or even
Jared be a 7-1 man.
France
no risk, no biscuit. Come on,
Yeah.
that's the whole point.
That'll be a fun one to watch actually in the lead into that game. I don't think Easterby is going to go matchy with France in that respect.
There's no chance that any of these Cian Healy won't, but Conor Murray probably won't. Peter O'Mahony Lions. I mean, this doesn't rule them out, obviously, technically, but from an optics point of view,
I don't know. I think
it doesn't look great.
Peter O'Mahony going on the Lions is absolutely a realistic. I mean, we know how much Andy Farrell loves. He absolutely adores him.
Yeah.
Like, so would you bring him along and say, not quite sure where you're going to get to, and then you get out there and see what happens? Like, again, we put this to Mike Sherry. He's like, it's not a developmental tour. You bring the players, we're going to win the competition for you. So, look,
Mike Sherry had to give something back to his
it's
mate.
unlikely.
Are we disqualifying Murray in terms of scrum half for the Lions? Because obviously JGP is above him, but, like, who's vying for that? You know,
I don't know.
Your Ali Prices of the world, your Jack Van Poorvliet,
Thomas Williams gets
Thomas
in.
Williams.
You know, there's a.
Yeah, Mitchell is it the English guy? I think
Alex Mitchell. Yeah,
I think you'd be going down. You'd be down the pecking order of it, I think, to be fair.
Maybe, but then you do have that experience, and he also captained them for a week, didn't he? When which tour was that? That was a South Africa tour, was it?
He's been on 3 of them, so yeah.
Right. I do think Felix going back to South Africa is a big missed opportunity from an Irish rugby perspective. Here is somebody who is at the very bleeding edge of world rugby, and we've taken somebody else from that coaching ticket and put them into Leinster. And here is a dub with very strong Munster connections who wanted to live in this part of the world and worked for England to achieve that, and now he's gone back to South Africa.
Where do you plonk him if you're the IRFU, though? If presuming it's the IRFU that's making the call, and, you know, obviously they have say over all the 4 provinces, but where do you?
I don't know. It depends. So we never got to. He obviously didn't come out in the way Mike Prendergast did and said, I want to be a head coach, and that's what is next on my agenda. So we don't really know what he's thinking, and he has politely declined all the offers we've made to come and tell us your story. But he does live in Dublin, like. So where do you plonk him? There's loads of roles in international rugby. Like, I personally don't think Simon Easterby's going anywhere. I think that's a succession plan for the big gig in Irish rugby. I'd be very surprised. But then stranger things have happened. At the same time, that obviously you want to have a succession plan in place for that, and he just seems to have this giant rugby brain, can do any one of a million jobs at international level. So I don't know.
It was in some ways surprising that he's gone back. It's like, hey Razzie, remember me? Listen, this was all a mistake. This was wrong, not the right fit to begin with. Bring me back. I don't know. Like, you'd be fascinated to know what went on behind the scenes. You'd have to assume that you would have to hope that somebody from the IRFU or Munster or wherever it might have been, that there was a sit down. You'd have to hope that at least there was a look, you're free, you're doing a bit of gardening, let's sit down. What bad can come from having a chat for an hour over a cup of coffee. You'd have to hope that happened. And then after that, I suppose it's like, obviously the Nina Bart thing had happened long before Felix Jones was available. So, I don't know. He will end up in the Irish system, obviously, at some point. It's 10 years, would you believe, since he retired from...
he's still a young man. I got, like, what was it, 37, 38, I think Phil was saying outside that he is. Like, he's still young.
And 10 years coaching.
Yeah. He comes back in and after the next World Cup cycle from South Africa, there's maybe a couple of jobs opening up in Irish rugby around then.
I mean, there's going to be loads. Yeah. Look, the other interesting aspect about it is that Razzie is happy to take the best available people, irrespective of if they have been part of the setup and left for a little while. He will welcome them back with open arms just in time to win the World Cup in Australia. Your mind starts to...
Are you saying there might be more?
I'm not.
Avengers unite this.
They will reassemble in time to win in Australia.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much positive information he's taken back from the England job. But,
I mean, Razzie does cite in the how great it is to have somebody who's done all the work on the Six Nations teams.
Are you talking about Jacques Niederbach here?
I mean, look.
But he's on the record saying he's not going back.
No, he's not.
He is.
What, he said, I'm never going back ever.
No,
under
I
any
don't think he went that far. I don't think he went that far.
There you go. He did say,
I'm here, I'm locked in, because it started to bubble up, and then it came into a press conference where it was sort of half alluded to, and then somebody said, but, like, come on now, are you going back? And he was very clear.
Well, he's got a 2-year deal, right?
Nobody's under any illusions that he's going to be here forever. And no, like, it's probably only fair to assume that he goes back, or maybe he does go off and decides to be a head coach somewhere else. There's boundless empty pockets in France, and there's loads of clubs over there that would absolutely pray to have somebody of that experience and with that game know-how to try and topple the likes of Toulouse, because there's been loads of failed experiments over there in recent months that we can all probably slide off the top of our heads.
It has been, it's been a very busy morning in Irish rugby. Peter O'Mahony, Cian Healy and Conor Murray have announced that they will no longer play for Ireland after the Six Nations. O'Mahony and Healy have announced their retirement completely from rugby as players. Conor Murray is going to pursue a playing opportunity abroad after the conclusion of his Munster rugby contract in July. Hopefully we find out sooner rather than later. Speculation will be a bit of crack over the next few weeks. That is this week's news cycle managed. So let's wait and see what everybody says about the French next week. Chin chin.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Bank of Ireland, a proud sponsor of Irish rugby. Never stop competing.